We're WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
I'm Albert Strickland, co-host of today's show.
And I'm Barbara Humphrey, also the co-host of today's show.
And we would like to say that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. But we hope they are.
Voices of Resistance is a project of the Savannah Justice and Peace Collective and the Savannah Peace Coalition, giving voice to the voiceless, those who have no voice in mainstream media. Our goal is to present issues that affect and infect all of us.
Today is our first show, so we're kind of new here. But we're really talking about when talking about what we wanted to do with this opportunity offered to us by WRUU, we came to the conclusion that we wanted to tackle issues that have a significant impact on our everyday lives. One such issue, of course, one of the major issues, is war. Rarely and barely is war covered by any of the mainstream media, anywhere. But war to us is the ultimate issue of the day. It consumes people, places, resources, environments, and is now looking beyond planet Earth, reaching into the universe. There is almost nothing that war doesn't touch, nothing. And the U.S. is the largest consumer, spending more than $1.3 trillion per year on war, nearly half of the entire annual budget, and more than all other industrial nations combined.
Much of the U.S. military effort is, and has been at least since 9/11, centered on the Middle East, where the U.S. is currently engaged in military operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, and are there any other countries we missed since we last tuned in? There may be. We are providing, the U.S. is providing military aid to the Middle Eastern countries, most specifically Israel, in the amount of approximately $3.8 billion per year for 10 years after 2017.
That's a lot of money, and you wonder why we can't have infrastructure here, we can't have the things that we need here. Well, there's the reason why. Almost all of it is going out, and they're even cutting the services and the things that we need to provide this money. So it's an issue that affects all of us. But today, we are very fortunate. We have as our guest today a very good friend, Will Griffin. He's a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan War and a member of the Savannah VFP, Veterans for Peace, Chapter 170. Recently returned from a VFP-sponsored peace delegation to Israel and Palestine, and helped coordinate a conference in Huntsville, Alabama on the weaponization of space sponsored by the Global Network, where now he is on the board of directors. He's the author of the Peace Report, which is something you should watch. It's very important. It's on YouTube. And Will, do you have anything to add to that brief introduction of your accomplishments?
Well, thanks, Albert, and thanks, Barbara. I'm so happy to be here. One thing that I've been working with is the Stop That organization, stopthat.org, and I'm on the steering committee for a U.S. task force. The official name is Stop That in Korea and Militarism in Asia and the Pacific, which is a really long name, but it's a daunting task, but it's a very necessary thing. So there's a lot of U.S. militarism going on in Asia and the Pacific. So Stop That is another thing that I do.
Great, thank you. You're certainly busy. It's time to get to today's topic, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Like most conflicts, this one didn't start in 1948 when the Israeli state was created, and we need to summarize the history of this region over the past 70 years to understand where we are today. Our history lesson begins in 1917. In advance of the end of World War I, the victors began dividing up the spoils of war, including the lands of the Ottoman Empire. The 1917 Balfour Declaration favored the creation of a Jewish state within the area known as Palestine, but no specific geographic area was designated for this state.
Nothing was done, of course, to implement this at that time, for this declaration. So there were a lot of countries that were greedy to take over this world, and the Middle East with its oil and its future in the global scene, they all saw this, so they wanted to control this land. The best way, of course, was to militarily control it. They did. The British Empire especially was hungry after this. Even our Churchill, one of our favorite statements of the British Empire statesman, was there in this dividing up of this Ottoman Empire. It wasn't a pretty sight, I'm sure.
No.
The U.S. delegation wasn't good either, but...
And it's important for us to keep in mind what else happened in 1917. The Russian Revolution in particular, and also the entry of the U.S. into World War I. So prior to World War II, Palestinian was home to Palestinians who were Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or none of the above, and all of them living together in peace. Following World War II, in 1946, U.S. President Truman established a cabinet to open the issue of the creation of the Jewish state in Palestine and announced his approval to admit 100,000 displaced people into Palestine in October of that year. He declared his support for the creation of the Jewish state in Palestine. Now, you can imagine there were many more than 100,000 displaced people in Europe looking to move into Palestine, but that at the time was the limit.
Yeah, and part of the problem was that these other nations didn't want to take them, so they thought that the best place is to put them in this little spot of land in the Middle East, and they could work this state out. It was supposed to be two states, Israel and Palestine, and of course we know the latter never happened, even to this day, so they were betrayed from the very beginning.
And
there was this resolution UN 181, a very important resolution known as the Partition Resolution, that would divide Great Britain's Palestinian mandate into Jewish and Arab states when the British mandate ended in May of 1948. And that was a very important date because that's the date that, of course, Israel, when the British moved out, Israel was created as a state.
And of course, we know that even though we were creating this Jewish state, this land was already inhabited by Palestinians. Fearing Soviet influence among the oil-producing Arab nations, the U.S. intervened and recommended to the UN that it create Israel as a Jewish state on May 14th. The Jewish state of Israel was born. The creation of the Arab state was forgotten.
Beginning in 1947. Even before the Israeli state, now this is really important to me when I found this out. I couldn't believe this. This is 1947. There is no Israeli state, no Jewish state of any kind. 1947. But the Zionists are already there. We haven't mentioned that word yet, but that's a very important word in all this that's happening. The Zionists were already in there with militia, and they actually were expelling people from villages, murdering people, massacring people. In fact, they took over, 700 or so camps and villages?
Yes.
Long before the state was even empowered to do anything. And so the people fled. I mean, you had these well-trained Israeli militia, and the Palestinians had nothing. They had no army, they had nothing. So when you were faced with that, you flee, which is what they did. They said many times they'd go into a place and the coffee would still be warm on the tables, sort of thing, where they fled. Or they left their shoes. They had to flee for their lives. So they flooded the nations around them in this great exodus. And it was not a good thing. And that's before the creation of the Israeli state.
Right. The term Nakba, which many of you may or may not have heard, commemorated yearly on May 15th, refers to the period of war between the Zionists and the Palestinians from December of 1947 to January of 1949, when approximately 80% of the Arab inhabitants of what became Israel left or were expelled, as Albert just mentioned, and they were prevented from returning by a subsequent series of Israeli laws once the state was created. The Zionist forces were never called on these atrocities, coming on the heels of the Holocaust, but rather were rewarded with their own state, and it's absolutely shameful. The status of the refugees, as well as their right to return to their homes or be compensated, is one of the many key issues in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since 1948, Israel has increased its occupation of Palestinian land. Palestinians controlled 82% of Palestine in 1948, but only 4.3% is controlled by Palestinians today, 2017. The U.S. has issued 226 resolutions regarding Israel since that time, many sanctioning the Israeli government for its illegal settlement actions. However, the U.S. has used its veto power or has abstained to block these resolutions.
Yeah, the UN has been very forthright on calling a lot of these things, but the one constant is that we're always going to block them if it really makes a difference. If it makes no difference, we'll play along with the game. And we've done that on several occasions. But for the most part, we are Israel's protectors, no matter what they do, in the United Nations. So Will, now you've been there. I'm very jealous. Remember I told you that. I'm very jealous of you. You get to go there. You get to be a part of something that to me is very important in the world today.
I've been very fortunate.
Very fortunate, yes. And you got to meet some very important people that play a key role in a lot of this. So tell us about the trip, how it came about for you to make this trip, and why it was important to you.
Well, I've been on previous Veterans for Peace delegations to other countries, so I knew there's like a main team, of VFP peace team that usually goes on a lot of these delegations. One or two people might switch out depending on the time and location. But in February to early March, Veterans for Peace sent a delegation, about 8 of us, to Palestine for about 17, 18 days. And this included myself, Mike Haynes, a San Diego VFP member, Ray McGovern, who's an ex-CIA analyst and advisory board member for Veterans for Peace, Matt Ho, who was the first Foreign Service officer to resign from the Afghanistan War in 2009. He's also on the VFP advisory board. Miko Peled, a very important Palestinian activist who grew up in a Zionist family where his father was an Israeli general that fought in the 1967 war. But after retiring, his father, the general, became a peace activist for Palestine because during the later years of his career, he was actually the governor of the West Bank. So Miko was there. He's also on the VFP advisory board as well. And then the two people who really organized most of this trip is Tarek Kalf and Ellen Davidson from New York. Very important characters. They've organized probably every VFP delegation trip that I've been on, from Okinawa to South Korea to Palestine. So they know all the people there. They're the ones who got all these advisory board members on the advisory board. So they're very important characters. And there's also, we brought a filmmaker, Chris Smiley, from LA. So we will be making a short documentary series about our trip there. The first one will be published, put out tomorrow on the Peace Report's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/The Peace Report. There's also a Facebook and Twitter that you can look up. But anyways, we went in the middle of February to Palestine, and for the 17, 18 days there, about 95% of the time we spent in the West Bank. We were fed by Palestinians, we met Palestinians, we stood side by side in protest with Palestinians, and we got shot at with tear gas with the Palestinians. So for a day or two, getting tear gas, we have an inkling of an idea of what it's like to be Palestinian. But we went there to learn about their issues, to learn about the West Bank and how they're being treated by the Israeli state, by IDF, about the Israeli settlers that are moving on and taking land from Palestinians in the West Bank. We traveled so many places, from Berlin to Bethlehem to Jerusalem to Hebron, and several other smaller villages like Nabi Saleh. Nabi Saleh is an interesting case because an Israeli settler just came running out of the car and hit a woman. But I'll talk about that in a moment. But the idea of this whole trip was just to learn and document everything and bring these stories home, so the world knows what's going on there, and also what American tax dollars are paying for. Like you said earlier, $3.8 billion a year are going to the Israeli state,
Yeah.
which is being used to occupy Palestinian lands and communities and destroying their entire lives. And I've met so many Palestinian activists that, a lot of the men have spent over a year in jail for just for doing nonviolent resistance, which over there they call it popular resistance. Over here we call it nonviolent resistance, but it's the same thing.
So you know about the what is the fast that they've called in the prisons right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's an important issue.
Their prison system is actually very interesting. I read about it in Miko Pelled's book. Miko's got a book called The General's Son. He talks about his life being raised in a Zionist family and turning into a full-on Palestinian activist. But he talks about the prison system where Palestinians have created this whole entire education system and a nonviolent resistance training system in the prison so that when they do come out, they're more prepared to deal with this occupation and to deal with it and face it with nonviolent resistance.
I find it very difficult to even consider to deal with this thing called this occupation. Your children going to school, you don't know if you're going to have a home. The child doesn't know when he gets home. It's happened many times where they get home, there is no home. It's been bulldozed.
Yeah, we went to we met a lot of what they call Bedouins, which is like the very indigenous local nomads of the region. And we visited this one small village where their homes have been demolished over 120 times. They keep rebuilding. The first time was like a really nice home, but after that they built something easy that you can put up in 2 or 3 days. But that's a form of nonviolent resistance, saying no matter what you do,
I'm coming back.
You're not going to destroy our community. We're coming back, right? And that's the number one takeaway from this trip for me is the Palestinians. Listen, Israel is an apartheid state. They treat Palestinians like third-class citizens, probably worse. Put them in jail for no reason, put their kids in jail for no reason, destroy entire communities, demolish their homes. They don't have rights. They can't leave. They can't go anywhere. You starve them of resources. You take away their infrastructure. The list goes on and on. But the number one thing I learned was that they haven't taken away Palestinian humanity. Their humanity, their soul is still the strongest, character of Palestinian life and Palestinian communities. They, as soon as we come in, they offer us food and a place to stay and take care of us, and they treat us way better than I've been treated in any Western country that I've been to, for sure. Especially even here at home in Savannah, the people are just so nice and genuine and caring and sharing, despite having their lives completely destroyed for years and years and years. And, the kids that we met, they don't know what life, well, actually all of them, they don't know what life is like without this occupation, without having Israeli Defense Forces, which is the Israeli military, running around with weapons, pointing at everything. They haven't pointed at us. If we wore our BDS pins, BDS stands for, it's a movement that stands for boycott, divest, and sanction of any corporation or state that is contributing to this occupation, from the Hewlett-Packard computers and software systems to American tax-paying dollars, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's another aspect of what it's costing us. It's not just the 3.8 or almost $4 billion a year. It's the investment that these companies are doing in. And they're at Christmas time, what you go to the store and you buy perfume for your mother. It's usually Estee Lauder or something. Well, that's on the list of heavily supporting the homes that we're building in these occupations. Remax is selling them, so they're part of it also. Sara Lee, the list goes on and on. The vegetables and fruit, MasterCard, and of course the infamous Nestle Corporation, not only taking our water, it's also aiding this apartheid. And it's an incremental, I heard someone place it the other day, it's an incremental genocide. When we think of genocide, generally we think of it's done, that's it, you're going to wipe them all out. But the term incremental genocide means you take time, a little at a time, you take it. But the goal is the same as if it were done at one time. You're trying to get rid of them and push them out.
Which I would say is almost worse, because it's slowly taking away your resources, your right to live, So it's a slow, painful death compared to, say, I don't know what the term is for, what we think of genocide, like, actually going out and killing them, right in front of your face or whatever with a weapon or a bomb, right? So it's I think it's much worse, this incremental genocide.
Absolutely. I wonder if you.
Yes. There was one I did want to put on this list because it's one that we use quite often that we don't use anymore.
What's that?
Home Depot.
Yes,
Oh,
the owner of
Home
Home
Depot.
Depot is a Zionist.
The founder and chairman, what's his name, Bernard Marcus, he's an active Zionist, not just a Zionist. He is an active Zionist. He's on the board of directors for the pro-Israel media, what is this, the War Room, whose function is to ensure that all media in the USA is biased in favor of Israel.
Wow.
So when I read that, I said, well, I bought my last nail now.
What is that on their website? Just like their mission statement or something?
I don't know. It's on this little thing here called the
that's their
Consumer
little
Boycott of
brochure.
Israel Goods.
Wow.
These are the people that are supporting it. And you
Wow,
have to
see?
watch for fruits and things,
That's how open they are about it. It's disgusting. They're openly genocidal.
They have the power, so they're using it while they have it.
Yes.
Who knows?
And it may not be on their website, but it'll certainly be on our Facebook page so that everybody can know when they shop, if they understand that the power of their dollar is very powerful, where they shop and don't shop and what they buy and don't buy.
On the VFP Savannah.
It can be on the VFP
Facebook,
Savannah site as well as Voices of Resistance Facebook page. Absolutely.
Okay.
So I wonder if you could back up a minute, Will, and just tell us, as an American who is pretty free to walk most streets, go most places, what it felt like to have to go through checkpoints, because as we know, there's a wall, and to go from the Israeli to the Palestinian side, or mostly from the Palestinians going into the Israeli side, what that feels like.
So I spent 18 days there, and by the end of it, I was sick of it. I couldn't stand having to look over my shoulder to see if there's some IDF soldier following me, because that's what happened. They'd eye us down. They'd see BDS pins or our shirts that said "Free Palestine," which apparently, it's
not to like that.
Yeah, it's words on a T-shirt. Come on now, and it's nothing degrading. It's nothing obscene, right? So by the end of the 18 days, I was ready to get the heck out of there, and I was telling myself, I can't imagine living here. And I can't imagine being Palestinian. 18 days is enough for me. It was driving me nuts. But one of the things that kept me going was that since I am an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, which I deeply regret, having a lot of the Arab and Muslim similarities, that's what kept me going. And there's two other members of Veterans for Peace that are Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, and we were all feeling and sensing the similarities of Iraq and Afghanistan, and feeling, it brought back a lot of bad memories, like knowing that we did occupy and destroy entire countries, Iraq and Afghanistan, destabilizing this entire region, right? Our country, the U.S., is still doing this to this day. But what kept us going was knowing that we know for sure that we are not on the wrong side of history this time, right? We are there standing side by side with the Palestinians. No weapons this time, right? No weapons. And standing up to this apartheid state of Israel, these Zionists, these IDF forces, these Israeli settlers that come from all over around the world, including Americans. There were a lot of American settlers there. But the checkpoints are... You don't have to, usually you think of a checkpoint like when you're leaving the West Bank to go into Israel, but there's checkpoints within the West Bank to get from one side of the street to the other side of the street, right?
And what do you have to do when you go through a checkpoint? Just walk us through a checkpoint.
I actually went to New York City right afterwards, and they have the similar cage set up. It's like one of those rotating doors, but it's instead of window, it's like a cage-like metal bars. And you go through one of those, this rotating door that's like a cage, and then you go through this little room, and then they ask you through a bulletproof glass where IDF soldiers are on this other side asking for your passport. Sometimes they don't ask you for your passport. And that's one of the weirdest things we found. Like none of it made sense. Because if they were actually really securing the area, they would check everybody's passport at every single time. Some days they would check our passports, some days they wouldn't. It was really sketchy. So none of it really made sense. And also, being ex-military, we kind of know, we've been trained on doing these security issues. So yeah, you would, if you really wanted to secure the area. I mean, and this really proved that they were just antagonizing the people, destroying their lives, messing with it. It doesn't matter what we do. Sometimes we'll check you, sometimes we won't. It just depends on the mood that I'm in on that particular day. And then after that, you go into another side of the West Bank. And then and then you realize, what was the point of this checkpoint? None of it made sense at all.
And you went through these checkpoints with Palestinians. Were the Palestinians asked any questions about where are you going and what is the purpose of your...
Yes, so the Palestinians usually got checked 9 out of 10 times. And a lot of the areas, some Palestinians weren't even allowed to go.
Right.
Our activist organizers on the ground, the Palestinian organizers would walk us to the gate and be like, all right, this is where I stop. We can't go. Like in Hebron, there's this famous street called Shuhada Street. It got shut down after this horrible massacre. You can look it up on Wikipedia or anything. It's called the Ibrahimi Mosque Massacre, where an American Jewish male from the Bronx in New York, moved to Israel, and he became a settler, and he decided to go to this Ibrahimi Mosque one day and open fire, killing dozens and hurting hundreds more. And ever since then, they punished the Palestinians.
Of course.
They shut down the street, which was a bustling market where they were selling all kinds of things. So the Palestinians in Hebron are not allowed to go into Shuhada Street. Only certain ones. We weren't really sure which ones could and which ones couldn't. It's weird. Some Palestinians do live in Shuhada Street, but when you go there, it's a ghost town. Everything's locked up. There's metal doors everywhere.
Isn't that the one with the...
So we decided to, it's near, Shuhada Street. It's all around. Not the actual Shuhada Street, but there's streets near it that have, nets above you, because the Israeli settlers live in the second and third and fourth floors, and they're always throwing, not just trash down at the Palestinians on the bottom, but fecal matter, urine, rocks that could literally kill you, poles, and I think people have been killed before. It was a really disgusting sight to see. But we met with a local organizer who is being charged by the Israeli Defense Forces. His name is Issa Amro. There's a petition going on online, and the UN is actually supporting him and recognize that he's a peace activist. So Issa Amro and Veterans for Peace decided to do this revolutionary act of selling vegetables on Shuhada Street, right? Because it's completely
food.
So we brought out oranges and cabbage and something else, and we're out in the streets like 1 shekel, 1 shekel. Here we go, 1 shekel for an orange. And then you know what? Not only did IDF come out, but the Commando Forces came out, which is a special forces group, which is the more elite groups of the military, came out to stop us from selling vegetables. And the way they wanted us to stop, they pulled out a piece of paper, say, listen, here's an order from our commander saying that you cannot sell vegetables on the street. Miko Peled, who can read both Hebrew or Arabic and English or what, but it was in Hebrew, and he was like, listen, there's no date, there's no signature. So the commander of the unit right there, who's not the general who gave the order, took the paper to the side, signed it, put a date on it, and said, okay, now it's official. We're like, you just made this up in front of us. We have that all on film, so in the weeks and months ahead, we'll be talking about this on the Peace Report.
So we'll hold these thoughts for a minute while we identify who we are. We're WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Brighter Day Natural Foods, offering produce, vitamins, and supplements, and a deli and juice bar. Brighter Day is located at 1102 Bull Street at the south end of Forsyth Park. More information available at 912-236-4703 or brighterdayfoods.com. If your business enjoys the programming on WRUU-LP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving economy based on a diverse and vibrant community. Our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU LP.
So thank you for staying with us. I just want to remind you, as we're listening to Will, Albert, and myself, that this is not something you're going to hear on the mainstream media. And we are so appreciative of the opportunity WRUU has given us to present the voices that you're going to only hear on stations such as this. So, Will, let's continue with this amazing conversation, and please talk to us a little bit about the settlement issue and your experience when you were confronted by illegal settlers, when your delegation was confronted.
So we were in Hebron at the home of an organization called Youth Against Settlements, which I mentioned earlier was created by Issa Amro, where he trains kids, the youth in Hebron, on how to. He trains them on nonviolent resistance. He trains them on how to film IDF, on what you can and cannot do to be in safe places while filming, and to go online and expose what's going on, which is really great. So we're in Hebron, in one of the hills out there, and right behind the home of the Youth Against Settlements organization, which is generally a house, there is an Israeli military base. Huge Israeli flag and soldiers that actually come on to the Youth Against Settlements house property and do training, which is completely illegal. But, I mean, who are you going to report it to? That's they right. are the state, right? Right behind in the backyard there's a huge fence, and on the other side of the fence we saw this group of settlers that are not just standing there but doing a tour. So and then I overheard English and American accents. So I was like, this group is from America. I was like, there's no way. So Chris, the filmmaker, and Mike and I went to the fence and started looking at them. They noticed us. As soon as they noticed us, one IDF soldier comes out, and he comes straight up to us, and then he gets on his radio. He's like, I don't know, I need backup or something like that. So another soldier comes out, and I'm like, and then I saw the tour guide kind of point in our direction and was like, oh, don't worry, the IDF soldier's here to protect us. And that's when I was like, what? I mean, I'm not holding a weapon. I'm wearing civilian clothes.
Veterans for Peace.
I'm wearing, Free Palestine, right? And so I spoke out. I was like, hey, listen. I was like, we're from the U.S. as well. We're former military members. I was like, we're unarmed. We're not going to hurt you. So please don't worry about this. And then they all kind of like, a lot of the tour group looked at us, nodded their heads, and was like, oh, okay. And then the tour guide was just like, oh, well, thanks for letting us know. And then he turned in the other direction and started doing their. So they're actually literally doing tour guides showing the life of Palestinians. And like it's some type of a zoo, right? But these are humans. These are communities. These are people, which is really disgusting. That was really the only encounter we had with Israeli settlers. There was one other, there's one other in a small village called Nabi Saleh, which is actually really famous, where we met the youngest journalist in Palestine. Al Jazeera did a little bit on her on one of the Facebook videos and has gotten like 25 million hits or whatever. She's amazing. She's 10 years old. She speaks English. She speaks Arabic. I think she speaks I don't know if she speaks 2 or 3 other languages. But anyway, she's an amazing activist, amazing young woman. And her Facebook page is called Jana, Janna, Jihad. Sounds very scary, But I mean, if you know anything about Islam, Muslim life, jihad simply means a struggle to reach peace.
Yes, nothing
right?
bad about it.
Which there's really nothing. So mainstream media have converted and convoluted that term and turned it into this scary term. But anyways, it's a 10-year-old girl. I mean, how scary can that be? And then all she's doing is carrying a camera and showing. Anyways, so we went to Nabi Saleh, decided to do a demonstration because there's a valley, and in the valley.
This is a weekly event, right?
No, they just do it whenever they can, and we told them, we're like, hey, we're Veterans for Peace, we want to do a demonstration while we're here. So Jana's father, who's a huge leader in the non-popular resistance movement there, said, okay, let's do it tomorrow morning. We'll take your banners, we'll grab your groups, we'll go down in the valley where there's a road, and the road basically splits the Palestinian side and the Israeli settlement. So the road is used by both, right? So we went into the road, and there's a main road in the valley, but there's a turnoff that turns into a dirt road that goes towards the settlement. We decided to go onto that dirt road, hold a few banners and signs up, and just stand there and see what happens. Within minutes, Israeli settlers started pulling over and yelling at us. Immediately, one settler pulled his car up straight to Matt Ho, who's standing in the center of the banner, and he's pressing his bumper against his knees. And he's actually like pressing on the gas, but since it's on mud and it was a little wet that morning, he started spinning out. So if he didn't spin out, he would have pushed Matt over fairly aggressively. But the way Matt responded was, I mean, he just walked up to the window and was like very calmly, like, "Hey, man, like, what's the problem? We're just standing here." Very calm voice, right? Because they would, I think most people would respond aggressively, loudly, yelling, "Hey, don't run us over!" And Matt was totally calm about that. I mean, that's part of the training of nonviolence resistance is, you got to be calm in these situations. Maybe 10 minutes later, more Israeli settlers started pulling over, getting in the cars, yelling, shouting, and the Palestinian activists as well as Veterans of Peace just continued doing chants. And there's a lot of back and forth yelling, but eventually there were two women. I think they were from Spain. They're from Europe somewhere, but one Israeli settler pulled up, stopped, screeched his car, jumped out, went straight towards one woman and punched her right in the face. Right, and as soon as he punched her, he turned around and Mike Haynes, who's a Veterans for Peace member from San Diego, approached the guy. Was like, tried to stop him. The guy turned around immediately, started swinging on Mike, and then then he just went off and started yelling at other people. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, there was another confrontation. People started, gathering up closely, yelling at each other. One side Israeli settlers, one side Palestinian and VFP activists. And there's this one popular activist named Munther from the Ida refugee camp in Bethlehem. He happened to be in Nabi Saleh that day with us. And he's standing there. And this one Israeli settler just kind of walks up behind other Israeli settlers, sticks his head out, and just spits in his face, and then runs off. And Munther, if I could picture him, he is probably 5'11", 250 pounds, really big guy. I would not want to spit in his. I would not want to make this guy mad. And Munther got so mad, started chasing this dude. Like Matt Ho, who's 6'3", had to step in and hold Munther back, and he was saying he was having trouble trying to hold him back. But I don't blame Munther for being that mad. I mean, the guy literally spit in his face and ran off and hid behind the other Israeli settlers. Right? What a coward act to do.
Right.
And of course, we know that the IDF there is to protect the settlers.
And that's another thing that happened. The IDF came out. So this is the really crazy thing. So there's IDF soldiers and there's Israeli settlers. Settlers are just civilian populations that live in the West Bank on Palestinian land. The IDF soldiers actually have more rules to follow and more restrictions on how they behave compared to the Israeli settlers, which are civilians. And these civilians can do whatever they want to the Palestinians on the ground, and then the IDF have to come in and protect the settlers, which is one of the most disgusting systems that I've ever seen. The IDF can't even do certain things, but the Israeli settlers can come up, spit in someone's face, punch a woman, and the IDF will have to come there and protect the settlers, and even shoot the Palestinians who might approach the settlers, right?
With
Just
no repercussions at all.
no repercussions at all. Nothing happens. There's not even a statement to, I don't know if they even, to police departments, to the military, to the state.
How difficult that is for us here to understand that something like that is actually happening, and how we would feel if we were here. It's amazing that this is allowed, that we are supporting this. We're not calling it out for what it is. And you mentioned the word zoo a few minutes ago, which is what it is there. I mean, Gaza is like a zoo. It's a cage. You can't get out. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. You are like shooting when the soldiers were shooting them during that so many conflicts.
Well, they call it the world's largest prison.
It is,
but it's not just a prison. It is like a prison zoo, because literally, Israeli settlers, the hardcore Zionist people, come out and put lawn chairs out, or they even have tour buses that drive by protests, so they can just watch some of the violence that might go down. It's watching Palestinians get hurt by the IDF, watching them get tear gassed or shot with rubber bullets, or what they call sponge rounds, which can do it's like the size of a tear gas canister with a huge rubber end to it, it's just like a huge rubber bullet is what it is.
It actually has killed.
And it has killed people. All these things have killed people, from the tear gas to the rubber bullets.
Though, right?
Right, those non-lethal weapons that have killed. So did you get that confrontation on video?
Yeah. So Chris Smiley on Facebook has the video, just a short, I think it's like 45 seconds of the Israeli settler punching the woman in the face, and the car going up to Matthew Hode's knee, and trying to push him off to the side. And I don't think it has. No, it doesn't have the Israeli settler spitting in Munther's face, but. In the next coming weeks, we're going to slowly be putting out these short documentaries, like maybe 10 to 20 minutes long, showing basically each day, because we were there 17, 18 days. At least 10 of those days were very significant days where we had, big protests, hundreds of people. A few of them was thousands of people. A couple incidents of us getting shot at with tear gas, or encounters with the Israeli settlers. And even going to the Knesset, which is the parliament, kind of, their Congress, meeting with two of their Congress men and women.
And I think it's important just to remind everybody, this is being done by a country that's being described as the only democracy in the Middle East, a country that the U.S. is heavily supporting, primarily with military aid. And
that's what
we as Americans need to think about this. Go ahead, Will.
When we would walk around with BDS pins or Free Palestine shirts, IDF would always, or the Israeli police department would stop us, and obviously they're looking at our peace paraphernalia.
Don't be for peace now. That's a dangerous
thing. And they said, "Why you wear this?" And this is anti-Israel. And we got, we didn't think about this till the end of our trip, but we said, what, if we get asked again, we're going to say, because they always ask us, why are you in Israel? What are you doing here? Why did you come? Well, we want to say, we wanted to visit the only democracy in the Middle East.
Good.
How
That's
can you
great.
be a democracy when you have this segregation there in the beginning with, the Palestinians and even the Israeli Arabs, who are actually citizens of Israel. They have very few rights compared to the average Israelis, like 1/3.
So, I do want to talk about, I spoke with Dr. Jeff Halper, who is a co-founder of an organization called Israelis Against Home Demolition, but he does a lot of phenomenal work. But I asked him to explain to me the types of citizenship, right? So, there's three types, essentially. There's the Israeli citizens who can walk around freely and live their lives, protected by the military and the state and whatnot. Then you have the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, who are not allowed to leave those areas, confined to those areas, cannot vote, have essentially no rights, no actual citizen rights that we would think of here in America. And then there are the Jerusalem ID citizens, right, who can go back and forth they can actually travel throughout the whole entire country, from Israel to West Bank to Jerusalem, right? They just cannot stay the night, overnight, in either Israel or the West Bank. They have to stay in the city of Jerusalem, where they claim their residency. And if they're not, obviously they can't claim residency to Israel, but they can claim residency to the West Bank, right? But if they do that, they're never allowed to go back to Jerusalem or Israel. They'll become a Palestinian citizen where they can't leave the area at all.
This is democracy in action, right?
Exactly. And Jerusalem is the city that kind of, one side is goes in the West Bank,
Right.
the other side goes into Israel. And,
I understand it's quite distinguishable too, because of the poverty on one side and the wealth on the other, much like
yeah, from the Jerusalem, from Damascus Gate, which goes into Jerusalem.
Right.
If you go towards Israel, markets, streets, buses, everything that you would imagine in a modern city. You go into Jerusalem, it's just like a huge market in this very old and unique castle-like buildings and alleys where there's just people selling all kinds of great things. There's restaurants and coffee shops, right? But then you go into the West Bank, and then you see, almost ghost town-like streets. You might see one store on a street, and you do see, obviously, you see the poverty, and you see broken down cars on the side of the road, and very diminished looking communities.
It's very difficult, because I know that in Gaza itself, the massive destruction last year that they did in the 56 days war, where 2,600 people were killed, and 600 of those were children, and we're standing here watching this happening and sort of thing. It's really strange, but I can't imagine living in that type of environment. When I send my child off to school in the morning, he's got to go to the checkpoints. If he goes in, we've got to go to the checkpoints. I watched the videos, which we're going to be posting a lot of these videos, YouTube, onto the Savannah Peace Coalition Facebook page. So, and they're really heartbreaking, actually, to see the look on some of these children's faces. And these soldiers actually play with them, pointing guns at them and pushing them against walls and this sort of thing. These are children, 5, 6, 7 years old. And I can only imagine the mental damage that's being done
terrorizing.
to them.
Terrorizing these children.
This is acts of terror. When you look at a child's face and you see that, that's terror.
I forget what the stats are, but yeah, they have really high rates of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide rates, and a lot of different things that are just destroying their communities. There's one incident in Berlin where the IDF we just got done with a protest, and the IDF was chasing this. Pretty sure he was somewhere between 17 to 19 years old. And it was through the hills, and there's rocks everywhere and rough terrain, and the kid broke his leg, fell down. IDF no longer wanted him. They didn't want to deal with having to carry him, having to take care of him, having to send him to the hospital. So they left him, just completely left him, which that part is going to be in my short documentary series that's coming out tomorrow, which is about Berlin Day 1, which is the first day we spent when we got to Palestine, which celebrated 12 years of nonviolent weekly nonviolent resistance. They call it Friday demonstrations.
For 12 years.
For 12 years.
So as wonderful as this conversation is, I want to take us back to BDS for a moment. I want to remind our listeners that this BDS movement was incredibly effective in ending apartheid in South Africa. And if we think it's not effective in Israel, I want to make sure everybody knows that in New York State, the governor of New York, by executive order, has said that the state will not do business with any individual or corporation supporting BDS. He has, in fact, created a blacklist. He's blacklisted individuals and corporations, and that executive order is before the New York State legislature to be codified into law. Minnesota is also considering similar legislation. Israel has said they will block entry into the country of any individual supporting BDS. BDS is being presented as anti-Semitic, And I feel that I, as a person coming from a Jewish home, who legally is considered Jewish because my mother was Jewish, want to make the statement that, in fact, I do not believe that this is anti-Semitic. This is simply a movement to bring just peace to an area where there has been incredible bloodshed since at least 1947, and in fact, long before that, as the Zionist movement, became more powerful in this area, this mandate area of Palestine. So when people talk about this being an anti-Semitic movement, I have to say, as somebody of Jewish heritage, I do not believe for a minute that it is. And I hope you will all take that under consideration.
That's an outrageous claim.
Totally outrageous.
There's so many Israeli activists
Right.
in Israel that
That's
support
right.
BDS.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally
how are they being
outrageous.
anti-Semitic towards themselves?
Right. The other thing I think it's important to mention at this point, and with the time remaining, we'll go back to Will, but at this point, we need to mention that on Sunday, April 23rd, the Veterans for Peace Savannah Chapter 170 will be screening Occupation 101 at the Sentient Bean at 7 p.m. This documentary focuses on the current and historical root causes of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and U.S. political involvement. Will be present for the screening. He will introduce Occupation 101 and also lead a discussion afterwards to answer questions. There will be more information about the boycott, divest, and sanction movement at the April 23rd screening. And in fact, we hope there will be something for people to sign, because we would like to present this to the Savannah City Council, asking that the city join the BDS movement. We're pretty sure that won't happen, but we feel the ask is important, and we would like to get some publicity around the ask so people are aware of this movement and its power in terms of bringing a just peace to this area. So,
Well, certainly it is effective, or Israel wouldn't be responding this way.
Right,
They'd ignore
absolutely.
it. The fact that they are taking this type, and AIPAC and all of the pressure, I can only imagine the immense pressure intense pressure they're putting on congressmen and senators and the White House and governors and mayors. So it must be working.
Absolutely.
So keep it up.
Right.
Learn what it is. Learn what we need to be boycotting, and also put some pressure on those senators and congressmen if that's your way of thinking. Do it.
Absolutely. Will, do you have any other ideas for what we as Americans can be doing at this time to be bringing a just peace to this land?
Well, I think the main problem is, so it's either one of two issues. Either Americans don't care about what's going on, that they know what's going on and they just don't care, or the other one is that they don't know about the issues, right? It's either one or the two. I tend to believe that they don't know. I've spoke to people across this country, students, retired, activists, non-activists, and people just don't know. They don't know about what the U.S. military is doing. They don't know what the U.S. government is doing. They dang sure don't know what Israel is doing and how the U.S. is supporting that, right? So I think educating them is one of the most important things to do, and that's one of the reasons and main reasons that I created the Peace Report, which, the slogan is anti-war and nonviolent news for peace and justice. That covers all types of thanks, and it covers all types of issues, including this Palestine-Israel conflict, and it talks about the BDS movement. But yeah, I think educating Americans on what's going on, how it's being conducted, how the U.S. is influenced, because I think Americans do care. I think a lot of Americans, the majority of Americans, do care if they did know, right? They just don't know about it. So education is number one thing, and then after that, I think everything else will fall into place.
Absolutely. So I would like to remind our listeners that if you have any questions about anything that was presented today, or you would like more information, you can email us at the Savannah Peace Coalition at gmail.com or Voices of Resistance at gmail.com, or visit the Voices of Resistance Facebook page at https://www.facebook.com/Voices of Resistance. We would love to hear from you. We would love your reaction to this show, as well as suggestions for future shows. I want to thank Will for being here today to talk to us. We'd like to invite him back to talk to us about the global network and the militarization of space.
Yeah.
This is Barbara Humphrey saying thank you. And
Well,
We've still got 5 minutes.
we've still got 5 minutes.
This is ours,
No,
Beth.
I want you to remind everybody
Yeah.
again about the April 23rd screening, and also give us your farewell, your sign off.
My, I hope not my farewell.
No, your sign off.
I draw it off there. I'm not farewelling yet. Yeah, it's been a very interesting thing. It's something I've been involved with a long time, long before I became a VFP member. So if you are a veteran and you are concerned in peace now, and you want to put away these things of war, the Veterans for Peace organization is one that's designed to educate people, as Will was just talking about, on the true cost of war. It's a lot more than we think. It's not just $1 out of your pocket. It's lives, it's resources, it's the environment. It's a horrible thing that we really need to start doing something about. And who better than soldiers who've been there and seen that, and also their family members and people who are interested just in, let's put this behind us. Let's start working for peace. So Veterans for Peace, Chapter 170, Savannah, Georgia, Facebook page. Go there, leave a message, talk to someone. There are monthly meetings. They're listed on the page, too. Come out and join Veterans for Peace.
Right,
Let's make
second
some peace here.
Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at Francis Cabrini Church on Middle Ground Road is when Veterans for Peace meets, and you are welcomed to join the organization as a veteran or an ally of veterans, and we would love to have you because we can't have too many voices for peace. Next week's Voices of Resistance will discuss May Day and the labor movement, its successes and decline, and I hope you will join us for that on April 26th at 6 p.m.
Well, you get one more sentence there. What do you want to say?
I just want to say thank you for inviting me, and I think what you're doing is great. We need to have a local radio station here in Savannah to talk about these issues, because it's just there's nowhere else. This is it. This is the place to go.
That's why we were so happy when we heard this station, because I worked with Vicki from the beginning of getting the Savannah Soundings off, and to see that it's finally up and running, and a lot of work, a lot of hours. Support it. Ask everyone else to stay tuned, and I've always wanted to say this. I've still got another minute to this timing, because this is new. This is our first time, so give me a break here a little bit. But 2 minutes is a long time. You realize that, right?
2 minutes is a long time, and we can identify the station again and cut down on that 2 minutes. What do you think?
Okay, one more time.
Okay.
Give it WRUU.
You're listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
I also have to say this has been fun. Thank you, Will, very much.
Thank
for
you.
A lot of things, and we do want to see a lot of programs in the future on a lot of issues that face all of us that we are paying the price for, and let's do something about it. And we're going to end it now, because I do want to say this one thing. I've always wanted to say this on radio. I don't like interviews. I don't like people to stick a microphone in front of me with the camera here and say, what do you think? So this way I get to sit back, I've got a microphone, but there's nobody doing that to me, so I can relax a little bit. And I've always wanted to say this on the air. Tune in next week for another exciting adventure with the Voices of Resistance.
Yes.
Yes, it's kind of fun. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week. Go to the VFP page. Go to Savannah Peace Coalition. And let's start working together and build a peaceful world.
Absolutely. And come to the Sentient Bean for our documentary, Occupation 101, on Sunday, April 23rd at 7 p.m., and learn more about the Israeli occupation, the BDS movement, and more. Thank you so much.